Bell curve. Bell curve. What's a bell curve? Well, I know almost nothing about mathematics, so really I shouldn't tell you what a bell curve is. There's probably some statistician somewhere who can, tell you more about it, but what I'm talking about today is the bell curve in developers and publishers. Bell curve. The bell curve is another name for what's known in probability theory as normal distribution, and I'm going to apply it to developers within the games industry. Why? Well, here's my simple graph. This y-axis represents the perceived quality of a title. The x-axis is the popularity of the developer that made the title. Now, I have the same mathematical ability as your average third grader, and I've played the edutainment titles to prove it. As a result, I won't be trying to make any graphs of my own, as that would be like trying to teach an elephant how to crochet. Instead, I'll be using a standard bell curve graph and haphazardly pasting stuff over it. Mathematics. Let's take the big releases from Blizzard Entertainment as an example, with user scores from Metacritic. Warcraft 2 at a respectable 8.6, then 8.7 for Diablo, and then 9.1 for StarCraft and Brood War. Each of these releases made the company more profit and increased their popularity in the eyes of the gaming world. The quality of the output remained good despite this, with an 8.8 for Diablo 2 and another 9.1 for its expansion. Heading into the mid-2000s and Blizzard was getting even more popular, peaking at 9.2 for Warcraft 3 and 9.3 for its brilliant expansion. Then they reached critical mass with World of Warcraft, but the user scores sharply declined from their heyday, now hovering between 7.4 and 8.1. A lower critical consensus than anything they had released before. At this point it didn't matter because they were making money hand over fist. The scores were bolstered by the return of StarCraft at 8.3 and some well-received expansions. But by Diablo 3's release in 2012, Blizzard was trending between 4.1 and 6.1, and a few years later its days of making innovative content were done. BioWare were the same. After struggling with Shattered Steel, they hit it big with Baldur's Gate, sliding down slightly with MDK2 and back up with Baldur's Gate 2 at an enormous 9.1. The general trend remained the same for a good while, with all their games in the next 8 years hovering between 7.6 and 9, with a brief blip of a DS Sonic game at 6.9 being the only outlier. At the end of 2007 they were bought by Electronic Arts, and continued to release quality titles like Dragon Age at 8.7 and Mass Effect 2 at 8.9. The signs of rot were there though, with the DLC scoring much lower than the base games as corporate pressure to nickel and dime their audience was responded to poorly. The plunging quality came around 2011 when Dragon Age 2 stank up the place with a 4.6. Their return to the Old Republic in MMO form only got them a 6, and Mass Effect 3 capped off the trilogy in divisive fashion with 5.9. Talk about a fall from grace. Inquisition got 5.9, Andromeda got 5, and Anthem got 4. I think you can see a pattern here. This happens almost universally in all forms of media. It's part of being human. A creative team makes something amazing, they get more and more attention, said attention either goes to their heads or brings about people that are only interested in money rather than the craft. Parts of the team fragment and are replaced with others who aren't as good, or the entire company gets bought up and swallowed by somebody bigger in order to monetize it further. Or the progenitors of a great title simply change with the passage of time. But James, you decry! Meta scores from users posted long after the fact aren't the basis for a good contemporary consensus, and development teams differ vastly from game to game. It is possible for a developer to keep making great games by swapping out people that start to produce less than outstanding material. But eventually the almighty wheels of commerce will grind that selective survivorship to dust. Fortunately, your complaints are where my next point comes in. By refusing to buy new titles on release and instead waiting until there's a critical consensus after the fact, you get rewarded for your patience. If you wait even further, you can watch the entire back catalogue of a developer unfold, and discover what's worth cherry-picking from it rather than simply seeing a logo and automatically buying on reputation or media hype alone. This works even better the older the games are, with the only exception being multiplayer-only titles, whose servers may have long since shut down, or are a ghost town compared to what they used to be when they were new. The review bombing and hype building will have settled long after the fact, and a clearer picture of whether the game is actually worth playing will have appeared. Not to mention the fact that some games will be much better 10 or 20 years down the line than when they were first released. It's how I know to purchase and play Dungeon Keeper from 1997 instead of Dungeon Keeper from 2014. So next time you plan on picking up a game, remember the bell curve, and take your time before deciding whether this title really is worth your money. Now, back to waiting for my pre-order of Cyberpunk 2077.